What would you do if a decorated military officer, someone who's risked everything for their country, was treated like a criminal the moment he stepped off a plane? No crime, no threat, just skin color and a uniform that didn't look right. This isn't just a story about one man. It's about a system and the quiet power of standing your ground. Stick around till the end, and if stories like this matter to you, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us in amplifying the voices that too often go unheard. The hydraulic sigh of the jet bridge echoed through Terminal B of Crescent Pines International as passengers trickled out, lugging sleep and layovers behind them. Among the crowd emerged a striking figure, a tall, composed black man in crisp military green. Colonel Elijah Grant didn't stride so much as glide, each polished bootfall a testament to discipline. A canvas duffel hung off one shoulder, worn but purposeful. Heads turned as he passed, some out of admiration, others out of suspicion. He was used to both. This was a return, not a homecoming. No ceremony, no applause. Just a connection after a classified assignment overseas. But before he could reach the carousel, trouble found him first. Two airport security officers posted near the concourse locked eyes on him the moment he entered their periphery. Officer Darren Cole, square-jawed, red-faced, always a touch too loud, and his partner, Officer Peter Mendez, younger, twitchy, with a hand that hovered too eagerly near his belt. "Excuse me, sir," Cole called out, stepping forward with a smirk. "Mind stopping for a moment?" Grant slowed but did not hesitate. "Is there an issue?" "Just need to ask a few questions," Cole said, eyes narrowing. "Routine. We've had some suspicious individuals coming off this flight. You mind showing some ID?" Unfazed, Grant reached into his jacket and produced a laminated card with cool precision. "Colonel Elijah Grant, United States Army." Mendez took the ID without permission, flipping it like it might turn into something else if he stared hard enough. "Colonel, huh?" he said, lips curled. "What brings you through Crescent Pines today?" "A plane," Grant replied evenly. Cole snorted. "Got jokes. Real funny." His voice dropped harder now. "Turn around. Hands behind your back." Grant didn't blink. "On what grounds?" "You fit a description," Cole replied. "Which is?" "Man. Alone. Military bag." Didn't make eye contact. Grant exhaled, controlled, measured. "None of that is illegal." Mendez had already produced the cuffs. "You resisting?" Grant turned slowly. He wasn't afraid, but he was tired. Of this. Of always being a question mark in the country he served. "You sure you want to do this?" he asked, voice low. Every syllable grounded in decades of command. But Cole didn't hesitate. The cuffs clicked shut, cold against Grant's wrists. "Absolutely," he said. And just like that, Colonel Elijah Grant, decorated soldier, son of veterans, protector of freedoms, was paraded through an airport like a suspect, not because of what he had done, but because of what they assumed he might be. The steel doors slammed behind them with a hollow clang, shutting out the noise of the terminal and sealing Colonel Elijah Grant into a narrow, poorly lit hallway reserved for airport staff. The buzz of fluorescent lights overhead matched the tension in the air. Officer Darren Cole stood in front of him, circling like a predator testing the edge of its cage. Officer Peter Mendez hovered in the background, arms folded, eyes darting. "So," Cole began, his tone sharp and patronizing, "mind telling us what you're really doing here, Colonel?" "I already told you," Grant replied evenly, returning from a classified assignment. "Just passing through." Cole let out a low, mocking laugh. "And we're just supposed to take your word for it?" Mendez chimed in, less confident but eager to contribute. "A lot of shipments pass through here. Weapons. Intel. Drugs. It's not hard to imagine someone slipping something past security even in uniform." Grant didn't flinch. "Scan the ID. Call the number on the back. Or better yet, check the badge case in my duffel." Cole stepped closer, ignoring the suggestion. "We don't take orders from suspects." "Then you'd better be sure I'm a suspect," Grant said, still calm. "Because you're making serious accusations without evidence." Mendez shifted his weight, uncertain. But Cole wasn't done. "You know what I think?" he muttered, lowering his voice to a near growl. "I think you're playing soldier. That's not a real badge. And that uniform. Probably rented." Grant met his gaze. "Then verify it. You have the tools. Use them." Instead, Cole's hand dropped to his holster. He didn't draw, but his fingers rested deliberately on the grip. the message unmistakable. Mendez stiffened, visibly uneasy. Grant stood tall, cuffed but unbowed. That's how you're going to play this. Threaten a U.S. Army colonel because you don't like how I answered a question. Cole took a half step forward. I don't like how you're talking to me. And I don't like a gun aimed in my direction for telling the truth, Grant replied. His voice remained level, but the air grew heavier, like the room itself recognized the line being crossed. You think that uniform protects you? Cole sneered. No, Grant said. I think it protects all of us, including people like you, but that doesn't mean you get to ignore everything it stands for. Mendez looked from Grant to Cole, then back again, caught between orders and conscience. Cole's grip on his weapon remained tight. But for the first time, uncertainty crept into his eyes. Colonel Elijah Grant hadn't raised his voice. He hadn't fought. And yet, the room had turned in his favor because strength doesn't need to be loud to be undeniable. The room was too quiet. Even the hum of the overhead lights seemed to recede as Officer Darren Cole's hand tightened on his weapon. With a slow, deliberate motion, he unholstered his gun and let it hover, aimed directly at Colonel Elijah Grant. Peter Mendez stiffened beside him, his face paling. Darren, he said under his breath. But Cole didn't respond. His pride had taken the wheel. You think you can walk in here and throw rank around like it means something? Cole growled. You don't scare me. Grant didn't flinch. He didn't take a step back. He didn't blink. Instead, he looked straight down the barrel with the calm of a man who'd faced real war and knew this wasn't it. Officer Cole, he said, his voice a scalpel, not a shout. That weapon in your hand won't give you control. It'll expose everything you're trying to hide: fear, ignorance, weakness. Cole's jaw clenched. Grant took a slow step forward, his hands still cuffed behind his back. The gun followed him, but Grant's voice didn't waver. You think this uniform is a costume? I've worn it in combat zones where men like you wouldn't last a day. I've carried wounded off the battlefield, stood over flag-draped coffins, and sworn to protect this country, including people like you. Mendez looked away, shame starting to take root in his eyes. But Cole stood frozen, his ego warring with the truth standing in front of him. You pull that trigger, Grant continued, and it won't be my career that ends. It'll be yours. Not because of me, but because the world will see you for what you are. And they will not forget. For a moment, nothing moved. The air was thick with tension, pulsing with the weight of consequences. Then came the first crack. Cole's hands, once firm, began to tremble. He blinked. Once. Twice. Grant's voice dropped lower, deadly calm. This is your last chance to remember who you are, and what you're supposed to stand for. A beat passed. Then, slowly, Cole lowered the weapon. The silence that followed wasn't relief. It was reckoning. The hallway door creaked open. What had moments ago felt like a sealed chamber of unchecked authority was now pierced by the sound of official footsteps and a calm, commanding voice. Is there a reason a senior Army officer is being held at gunpoint in a restricted corridor of a federal airport? Officer Darren Cole froze. The speaker was a tall man in a navy blue suit, a Homeland Security badge gleaming on his chest. Behind him came a TSA supervisor and the airport's terminal director, their expressions a mix of disbelief and alarm. Colonel Elijah Grant didn't turn. He didn't need to. His presence filled the hallway even in silence. The Homeland agent stepped in fully now, eyes locked on Cole's gun. Lower your weapon. Now. Cole hesitated too long. The agent stepped forward and pushed Cole's arm downward himself. The weapon dropped to Cole's side with a reluctant click as he holstered it, jaw tight, eyes avoiding everyone. The TSA supervisor glanced at the cuffs around Grant's wrists, then at Cole and Mendez. Did either of you verify this man's identification? Mendez opened his mouth, but no words came. Grant spoke instead, calm and clear. My ID was taken without consent. It was never scanned. No call was made. No protocol followed. The Homeland agent turned, voice sharp now. You handcuffed a decorated officer of the United States Army without cause. You pulled a weapon on him. In a federal facility. Do you have any idea the kind of fallout you're about to face? Cole stood still, the weight of his decisions finally visible in the twitch of his jaw. The TSA supervisor addressed Grant. Sir, are you Colonel Elijah Grant? Yes, Grant replied with quiet authority. We received clearance for your arrival directly from the Department of Defense. The supervisor said, his voice quickly turning to apology. We're deeply sorry, Colonel. This never should have happened. The Homeland agent gestured to the cuffs. Remove them. Mendez fumbled for the key. His hands shook as he unlocked the restraints. They clattered to the floor like a verdict. Grant stepped forward, shoulders unbowed. Next time, he said softly, make sure the badge on your chest doesn't outweigh the judgment in your head. And just like that, the silence was broken not with noise, but with truth. Colonel Elijah Grant rolled his shoulders as the cuffs were removed, a quiet weight lifting from his frame. He didn't gloat, didn't raise his voice. He simply stood taller, as if the room had finally caught up to who he was all along. The TSA supervisor stepped forward, his voice hushed with respect. Sir, we just received confirmation from the Department of Defense. Your credentials check out. You're listed as Tier 1 Joint Operations Command. He swallowed hard. We had no idea. Grant gave a nod, calm but unyielding. That's the problem. You didn't check. You didn't ask. You assumed. Agent Ramirez from Homeland Security turned to Cole and Mendez, his expression now colder than procedure. Both of you effective immediately. You are suspended from duty pending a full investigation. Surrender your weapons and badges. Cole tried to protest, but no words came out. Mendez removed his badge first, placing it on the table with trembling hands. Cole followed, silent, red-faced, pride crumbling beneath the weight of accountability. The airport manager, still pale from witnessing the encounter, quietly escorted them out of the room. Their departure was less an exit, more an exile. No one spoke. Grant turned to the TSA supervisor. I'll need my duffel. And a clean path to my gate. My flight leaves soon. Absolutely, sir. Right away, the supervisor replied, already gesturing to an assistant. As Grant collected his belongings, Agent Ramirez approached with sincerity in his voice. Colonel, I want to personally apologize. What happened here should never have happened. You were profiled, disrespected, and threatened. That ends today. Grant didn't nod. He didn't say thank you. He looked the agent in the eyes and said, make sure it doesn't happen to the next one. Then, without fanfare, he walked out, no longer a suspect, no longer bound, just a man in uniform reclaiming the dignity that never should have been taken. Colonel Elijah Grant sat quietly on a bench just outside the secured corridor, his duffel bag resting beside him. The low hum of the terminal filled the air, but around him, the space felt still like a storm had passed, but the atmosphere hadn't yet settled. Agent Ramirez from Homeland Security approached again, his expression one of earnest regret. Colonel, he began, I want to apologize again for what happened back there. It was unacceptable. It should never have escalated that way. Grant didn't answer immediately. He stared ahead for a long moment, then turned his gaze to the agent. His voice was calm, measured, but every word hit with the weight of lived experience. This isn't the first time, he said. But it is the first time someone's pointed a gun at me in my own country, while I was still wearing this uniform. Ramirez lowered his eyes, shame flickering across his face. Grant continued, you want to fix this. Don't start with apologies. Start with training. Start with hiring people who don't look at skin and see a threat. That officer thought his authority came from fear. He was wrong. The agent nodded slowly. We'll make sure this goes all the way up. Command will see everything. Grant didn't respond with approval. He simply stood up, adjusted his bag, and added one final line. Fear-based policing isn't broken, it's designed that way. So either redesign it, or expect more days like this. Then he turned and walked back toward the main terminal, the weight of his truth following behind him like a shadow that refused to be ignored. As Colonel Elijah Grant made his way through the terminal, the buzz of whispers followed behind him. Airport staff who had caught wind of the incident exchanged glances. Passengers who had witnessed fragments of what happened now watched him differently, not just as a man in uniform, but as a symbol of something deeper. He walked with his usual quiet authority, head high, boots steady. Security had cleared a path. His connecting gate was now just minutes away. Near the boarding area, an airport police officer stepped into view. She was a young black woman in a neatly pressed uniform, her posture straight, her expression composed but sincere. Sir, she said, gently stepping into his path. Her voice carried no tension, only respect. I heard what happened. I just wanted you to know not all of us wear the badge like that. Grant paused. He looked at her, really looked. Her eyes didn't carry pity but conviction, a quiet strength he recognized. He gave her a nod, subtle but meaningful. I know, he said, voice low. And officers like you, Remind me why I still wear this." They stood there for a moment, a silent exchange between two people who understood what the uniform should mean and what it often doesn't. Then, with nothing more needing to be said, she stepped aside. Grant continued toward his gate, the weight of injustice still heavy on his shoulders but softened, just a little, by the reminder that some were still standing for the right reasons. The fallout came swiftly. By the time Colonel Elijah Grant reached the lounge area, the gears of accountability had already begun to turn. Nathan and Peter were escorted out of the secured hallway by two federal agents, their weapons and badges confiscated. Neither spoke. Peter looked pale and disoriented, while Nathan wore the vacant stare of a man whose authority had just collapsed under its own weight. Internal Affairs launched an immediate inquiry. TSA officials began collecting footage from every camera in the terminal, every angle, every second. The Department of Homeland Security dispatched a legal observer to oversee the interviews and ensure that nothing was swept under the rug. A supervisor from Airport Command approached Grant discreetly. "Sir, for your safety and privacy, we're transferring you to a secure federal transport. Gate is being cleared now." Grant nodded. "Understood." Before he could move, an NSA agent arrived, formal and fast-talking. "Colonel, the Pentagon has been notified. They're requesting a full debrief on this incident, timelines, personnel, and recommendations. You've been authorized to report directly." He handed Grant a secure government tablet. The screen was already open, labeled Confidential Debrief Priority Level 1. Grant accepted it without a word. He'd written dozens of reports in his life on combat, on leadership, on crisis response. But this one felt heavier. Not because it was complex, but because it was simple. He was no longer just reporting on a moment. He was documenting a pattern. And this time, people were finally ready to listen. While waiting for his reassigned flight, Colonel Elijah Grant sat alone on a bench near a quiet gate. The chaos had passed, but the weight of the moment lingered. A young janitor pushing a cleaning cart hesitated nearby. Barely out of his teens, he had watched the entire confrontation from the edge of the hallway, pretending to mop just to stay close. He cleared his throat. "Sir, are you really a colonel?" Grant looked up, his eyes steady. "Yes, third generation." The kid nodded slowly, awe settling in. "They pointed a gun at you. You didn't even flinch. How were you that calm?" Grant didn't answer right away. He let the silence speak for a moment, then replied, "I wasn't calm because I wasn't scared. I was calm because fear isn't a reason to fall apart." The janitor blinked. "I don't think I could have done that." "You don't know what you can do," Grant said gently, "until the moment demands it." They sat in silence for a few seconds more. Then the janitor gave a quiet nod and rolled away, head a little higher, steps a little more certain. Grant watched him go, then looked out the terminal windows toward the airfield. That young man hadn't just asked a question, he had inherited a truth, one that would follow him long after the floor had been swept clean. Colonel Elijah Grant stepped onto the tarmac beneath the shadow of a waiting government aircraft. The turbine hum filled the air as a military aide saluted and opened the door without a word. Grant paused at the threshold, his eyes sweeping the runways and terminal one last time. No victory, no pride, just the quiet truth that something needed to change, and that change had already begun. Inside the aircraft, a secure tablet rested on a fold-down tray. Its screen glowed with encrypted prompts, already preloaded with his clearance level, and a request from the Department of Defense. Full incident report, priority review. Grant took his seat and unlocked the device with a biometric scan. His fingers hovered above the keys. Across the airport, Nathan sat in a glass-walled office under bright overhead lights, stripped of his badge and weapon. Internal Affairs investigators sat across from him, replaying the video footage frame by frame. "What exactly made you believe this man was a threat?" one of them asked flatly. Nathan didn't answer. Couldn't. The truth had already spoken louder than any excuse. Back on the plane, Grant began to type not just a report, but a reflection. He recounted the events, the words exchanged, the choices made and missed. But more than that, he wrote it as a mirror held up to a system that had allowed power to be confused with fear, and prejudice to wear the mask of procedure. This wasn't about revenge, it was about reform. Outside the windows, the aircraft engines roared to life. Grant didn't look up. He kept typing, slow, deliberate, unwavering. Because this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning. 1 year later, the name Elijah Grant no longer just belonged to a man. It had become a case study, a headline, a turning point. Across airports nationwide, TSA and airport police underwent revamped federal training, including mandatory modules on military protocol, racial bias, and de-escalation. In Kingsford, where the incident occurred, a plaque now hung near Gate 34, quietly engraved with the words, "Respect is not a privilege, it's a right in uniform and out." At military academies, new cadets were taught not just tactics, but dignity. The footage of Grant in cuffs, standing tall, unwavering, had been shown in classes not to incite anger, but to show what restraint, honor, and leadership look like when tested. As for Nathan, he was no longer in uniform. After a months-long investigation, federal charges were avoided by resignation and lifetime disqualification from federal service. His name, once hidden behind a badge, now lived in quiet shame, a reminder that power misuse doesn't disappear, it echoes. Colonel Grant, however, had moved on, not into retirement but into mentorship. He now served as a senior advisor on civil-military relations, helping bridge the widening gap between those who serve and those who enforce. Once a month, he visited the same airport where it all happened, not to revisit the past, but to ensure no one else would have to. One afternoon, a young recruit approached him timidly near baggage claim. "Sir," she said, "I watched the video from last year. It changed how I see this uniform." Grant looked at her, young, sharp, steady. "Then it did what it needed to," he replied. He didn't need monuments, apologies, or awards. What he needed, what he fought for, was now moving forward in the hands of the next generation. Because dignity once defended never fades, and justice once spoken never goes silent again. Through this story, we don't just witness a soldier maintaining dignity under pressure, we see a society forced to confront its own apathy and deep-rooted bias. We learn that sometimes silence is louder than screams, and dignity can stand tall even in handcuffs. So what can we do today? We can choose to question, to record injustice, to speak out even as ordinary citizens. And 5 years from now, imagine a new generation of officers trained not by suspicion, but by empathy, a generation of people no longer judged by the color of their skin or the cut of their uniform. Will racism be gone by 2050? Perhaps not completely. But if we keep holding stories like this up to the mirror, at least we won't be the ones who turn away when truth is being trampled. Note: this story is entirely fictional and created for the purpose of raising awareness. It highlights issues of responsibility, justice, and the importance of treating everyone with respect and dignity. We firmly oppose violence, prejudice, and injustice in all forms. Viewer discretion is advised.